Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to our program, Newsmakers. I'm Dan Cummings. So glad you've chosen to join us again, and you'll be gladder still after you've heard from our guests today. We're almost at St. Patrick's Parade time. Isn't that wonderful here at the end of February, bridging into March, the parade just a few weeks away. And I have the honor today of introducing to you, if you don't know him already, and I'll bet a lot of you do, our Gayle of the Year, John Tumino. There he is, the Gayle of the Year, chosen not necessarily because they have Irish blood, they may or they may not, but they've done great things in our community. So the parade community recognizes them, and this year recognizes him as the Gayle of the Year. John, welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
We're going to talk more about your ministries and the programs in this community, In My Father's Kitchen and Higher Ground. But first, he married an Irish woman, right? So
Yes,
Leanne is Irish. You want that? You want more? You were born, I understand, on St. Patrick's Day.
That's correct.
Is that possible?
St. Patrick's Day is my
March
birthday.
17th.
That's
well,
it.
He's got the bona fides here to be the Gayle of the Year. But beyond that, I want to show, as we roll the tape of the time when they brought you up and announced, what was it like when Janet Higgins and the rest of the parade committee announced you as the Gayle of the Year?
Yeah, it's an honor. It was an honor for me, and I was overwhelming knowing that the fact that I lived down the street from Coleman's. I grew up on Tip Hill. I know what St. Patrick's Day parade's about and St. Patrick's Day in the community. But not just that, it was the fact that as honoring In My Father's Kitchen as the Gayle, they were telling me that they didn't just see me, that they seen all the friends that I call our homeless friends outside. It wasn't about me, it was about acknowledging all those who are suffering in our community.
I hear you, but for this program today, as you address the media back there on that day, it'll be about you for a little while, because we need to learn more, as if we don't know enough already, about both of those ministries on the streets of Syracuse. I want to take you back, though, because a lot of us remember all of the great meals that you and your brothers and family used to serve up at Asti Cafe,
right. Yeah.
400 block of North Salina
Yeah.
Street. That's where it started for you. Actually, I guess you guys had a pizza shop there before Asti, right?
Yeah, from 87 to 95 was Tumino's Pizzeria, and then in 2002, Asti was born, and that's what I was doing with my brothers and my family for. And I left in 2011. It was 9 years for me.
But that was really the flagship of the early Little Italy movement.
Correct.
There on the north side. Now there came a time that Asti started like late 01, early 2002, right?
Yep.
There came a time, though, I understand, when you were in that kitchen at Asti doing what you do so well, making all those great meals, when you either heard or saw something that spoke to you. Can you tell me about that moment?
Yeah, for me being a minister as well. So it's 2009. I'm getting ready for the morning at the restaurant. And I was kind of doing my little prayer time, like I always do in the morning, and these words In My Father's Kitchen dropped in my heart. And I thought that it was a place that Leanne and I was going to have, that we would still use food as a vehicle to fill someone's belly, but then the spiritual part of my journey, that God's presence would come and change someone's heart. And I thought, wow, that's a really novel idea. But then I heard the words as a minister, getting the calling to go into vocation. It was time for me to leave the restaurant world behind and go out and take a step of faith in this journey.
And that's how In My Father's Kitchen was born in 2009.
The concept, and then I had an encounter with a gentleman and a homeless man standing on an off-ramp, and that's how I knew what I was supposed to specifically do. A guy holding a cardboard sign, I pulled over, fed him, had a conversation with him on an off-ramp for 20 minutes as he's unloading his life story to me, because I told him he wasn't invisible.
And you left a very successful restaurant business to devote your full energies, you and Leanne both, to what became In My Father's Kitchen, a nonprofit, which went to, still does, every day, I imagine, or every week on the street, a direct outreach, but you don't and never have really overtly encourage them to come right away and get some shelter. It's a sandwich. You offer them food and some fellowship.
Yeah, being a chef, so it's me making restaurant quality lunches. So it's lasagna, stuffed peppers, linguine alfredo, filet mignon, baked potato. So I'm bringing that kind of lunch. And in the beginning, they're like in awe of this lunch that they're getting. But then the next thing that happens is the relationship is established. The lunch becomes secondary.
Now we're looking at some of the meals that have been prepared over the years. In My Father's Kitchen and Higher Ground. This is our reporter, Josh Martin. You got some tacos working.
Yeah,
too, right?
Whatever it takes. Burritos, tacos. Food is the doorkeeper for me to go through this door into a relationship.
And when you open that door with great food like that, whether it's a sandwich or a taco, you have a conversation and you just let them tell their story, right?
No strings approach. So I come with unconditional love, with no strings, talk with them, and let them lead me in a conversation.
The shirt you're wearing in that video, we have the In My Father's Kitchen location there. It said Higher Ground. I want to go there now because these are two separate ministries, if you will, but they're very closely related. It was just a year ago when the county stepped up with some good money and you fundraised for the rest of it to start this operation called Hire, H-I-R-E, ground.
Correct.
Tell me how that program works.
So basically, that was an offshoot of my outreach experience. Even though I was helping folks get indoors, they didn't stop panhandling. So I was realizing, wow, we needed to do something different, and it was giving them an opportunity for day labor. So what happens on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, our higher ground van goes out to 3 pickup spots, and we pick up individuals who are either panhandlers or unemployed homeless, and they have an opportunity to work for 5 hours on the van with us on a work project, and it's usually beautification projects in our community. At the end of the day, they get paid $50 stipend for the work they did. They get a lunch and breakfast included, but it's 5 hours now of engagement with a care manager that's on the van, as well as our van driver, finding out the story and how we can get you to not panhandle anymore.
And Higher Ground was created because I think at the time County Executive Ryan McMahon and I think Mayor Walsh, they'd both been talking about this panhandling problem.
Yeah.
Men and women, mostly men, who are asking people on the streets of Syracuse for money, sometimes being a nuisance, and they said, well, let's crack down on that. But instead of cracking down, working with you and others, they said, why don't we just reach out and see if we can give them an opportunity to get off the street.
Correct. So they were thinking of making legislation where they would kind of go after aggressive panhandling. So you're criminalizing a situation and someone's brokenness. So they decided to table that. And then they were open to listening to some ideas, and now the rest is history.
And we see you here and others in your ministry on the street every day with the van. It's an outreach, but it's a low pressure outreach, right?
Correct.
You also get them into services if need be. Maybe they've got mental health issues or addiction issues. What are we looking at here, John?
So right here is our pickup spots, and then that's obviously a panhandler there. There's another one there, and like I could not name those guys by name. I know everyone out there. That's Carolyn, our care manager, who does an intake with them and finding out information. That's some of the work crew do, cleaning up around our community. But it's all about building relationships with individuals where they trust us enough to tell us their story. And once I know your story, I know how I can help you.
Yeah, and you definitely do help them. I'm going to take a break now, but when we come back, we're going to learn more about the origin of these two street outreach ministries in Syracuse, about John Tumino's vision for them, and how this Gayle of the Year is making a difference in our community. Don't go away. We'll be right back on Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers, everybody. Dan Cummings here. St. Patrick's Day is almost here. That means Parade Day in Syracuse. And I wonder if our guest, who happens to be the Gayle of the Year this year for the parade, will have to wear that beautiful Kelly green hoodie on Parade Day. I hope it's warm enough. We don't need the hoodies, but we'll see. John Tumino is our guest, Gayle of the Year, In My Father's Kitchen, Higher Ground. You know the ministries that he runs. As we take a look at a little more videotape from the ministries, again, some of this involves, like you said, it's a cleanup job. Some of these are men who are getting some day labor here, right?
So with me, when you're watching this, I feel like as they're rehabilitating the city and making it look beautiful, they're actually doing something on the inside of themselves as well. They're being rehabilitated and beautified themselves as we love on them and encourage them in their journey of whether it's addiction or mental health, to come away from those things, and then encourage them. If you could work with me for 5 hours in an addictive state, imagine if you let me help you get sober, I could plug you into employment.
And this is the day labor aspect of Higher Ground. You talked, before we get to some of the statistics over the several years you've run both of these ministries, you talked about addiction a moment ago. You yourself had an issue at one point with gambling.
Yeah,
right?
So my thing back in the day, I'm a survivor of 2 different things. So addiction, and I had a gambling addiction as well as a sexual addiction that I overcame because of great support system, my faith in God, and now it's been 28 years since that old person is, yes, and it's been awesome. And for me, I share with our guys and women outside, I might not have a drug addiction, but addiction has a lot of similarities, whether it's an addiction with gambling or sex or alcohol or drugs. There's a key component, and you're trying to fill a hole with these other things. And I love them and encourage them. If I could do it, you can do it.
And you were so encouraging to a young woman named Michelle, I think her last name is pronounced Noche, or
Noche,
who passed away. Can you tell me a little bit about how she intersected your life and how it has impacted?
She used to fly a sign over by Harold Place by the Dinosaur Barbecue, and I would engage her in the early stages of In My Father's Kitchen in 2011, 2012. And she was an alcoholic, she was a drinker, and she was living under the bridge. And I would encourage her and love her and try to get her to make a turn. And one day I approached her and she was crying and sobbing and telling me that she was sick of the guys taking advantage of her outside. She was being, abused physically, emotionally, and she was ready. And at that time, no one in the community knew who I was. I started making some phone calls And no one would really talk to me like, who's this guy, John Tumino, in my father's kitchen? And 2 weeks later, she gets murdered on that corner. And it just wrecked me, because here's a woman who was crying out to me for help, and I was trying to help, and doors were just closing to me, and then she passes away. And for me, I'll never forget that. That's the gasoline in my gas tank that keeps me doing what I do. It's life and death outside.
You said doors were closed because even though you told them Michelle's story, nobody could find the right place for her, or was she also reluctant to come for service?
No, so it was because no one knew me, because I was advocating on her behalf.
Well, who are you, right?
Right, who's this guy? Is it legitimate? You know, there's all those questions, which is understandable. And the good thing that happened because of that tragedy was that because of that, people found out about In My Father's Kitchen in the community. Now I have a seat on the Homeless and Housing Coalition. So I'm one of 50 members of that coalition now.
Well, Michelle's death, and how many years ago? It shook the whole community.
It was like 2012, 13. Yeah.
That was homicide. And yet we have some numbers which are both alternately encouraging and discouraging about over the years of In My Father's Kitchen and Into Higher Ground. How many men and women have been pulled off the street and got a new life, and how many have not made it?
So since 2011, 182 folks we helped out of homelessness. That's living in a place not meant for human habitation, under a bridge, in the woods, in a camp somewhere, in an abandoned house, into housing through the coalition. But 28 people unfortunately have passed away from addiction, overdoses, from 2 guys dying in an abandoned house fire, 2 people hit by vehicles and dying that way, 2 women murdered, and then the rest dying from complications of living a hard life outside. The life expectancy of a homeless person is 50 years old.
But since you started In My Father's Kitchen, 182 are off the street, living
in their own place somewhere. Yeah.
And getting a new lease on life, if you will. How difficult is it, John, even though you sit on that Homeless and Housing Committee, to find good, affordable, if you will, or at least stable, secure, safe housing? Yeah,
so the individuals get plugged into program services that are being funded by the federal government. So there's a lot of money that pours into our community. So like Catholic Charities, Liberty Resources, other organizations get federal funding. So there's subsidized housing situations. So it's either permanent housing, permanent supportive housing, or rapid rehousing. There's different programs. So when someone lands in one of those places, they're places that are, within the inner city limits, that are connected to, close to their services that they need. And the rents are pretty low and cheap, like $400 or $500, but it's being subsidized by a grant of some sort.
Now, the thing that will solve this problem, if you will, if not permanently, that's too much to ask for, but be a rock going forward, is permanent, stable employment as well as housing. They go hand in hand. And the group Higher Ground that we've already talked about needs more help from the private sector, right? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so the mission is you have individuals on our van that are working with us for 5 hours, and then there's candidates that we start to notice are ready for work. So we've placed 9 individuals into employment somewhere in our community. But one of the things that I found out is even though you might be ready that you're sober and you're dealing with your mental health, but you might not be still ready to work a full-time job. And half of those guys step back away from work. So we created a new kind of interim program where it's a job readiness program with CNY Works. So if I acknowledge a candidate I think is ready to work, we plug you into a middle person who gets you job ready for 10 weeks and then plug you to an employer. So right now we're looking for employers who want to give a guy a second chance.
Well, at the end of this program, you don't have to, you can go right to the website now if you're watching online. When you watch this, we're going to give you a link to John's own website at In My Father's Kitchen, and we'll connect you with that and with Higher Ground along the way. Having worked so much and so successfully, John, with the homeless population in Syracuse, when we still see, as we sometimes do, at the base of an on-ramp, under a bridge, someone with the cardboard sign up and they're asking for, is it your advice that we should, some people say no, reach out, roll down the car window, stop the car, put the flashers on and give them $5 or $10 if you've got it?
My recommendation is don't give money. So 95% of those folks that you see holding cardboard signs have an addiction of some sort going on or have severe mental health or both happening at the same time. I've never seen someone who's just down on their luck, they lost their job and they're out there flying a sign. It's usually because of an addiction when they get to that point. So I say don't give money, but you can give other things. I encourage people to make a Ziploc gallon-sized bag. If you're a person that you feel like you need to do something in the moment, be proactive, create a Ziploc bag with like deodorant, wet wipes, a toothbrush, toothpaste, different kinds of things, seasonal things like hand warmers in the wintertime, stuff like that.
Those ready. In your car.
And then when you get to that corner, you roll your window down and you acknowledge someone, and then give them the power of choice. Ask them if they would like it. They might decline. And if they say no, you don't take offense. At least you acknowledge someone, you gave them an opportunity. And if they say yes, then you hand it to them, tell them you're not invisible, put some information in there, 211, in my father's kitchen, rescue mission, arm them with information for help as well. And then if they say no, then you just say, okay, well, I just want to let you know I see you out here and I wanted to try to do something for you. Have a great day. Yep. And that's it. And don't be offended that they turned it down.
Good advice. Another break, and we'll come back to continue our discussion with John Tumino right after this. Our guest is John Tumino on Newsmakers this week, our Gayle of the Year, and he runs In My Father's Kitchen, Higher Ground. When we stopped the last segment, John, you talked about men and women on the street still at the underpasses and the ramps, to what we should do when we approach them. If we think they might not have any place to go, that 211 you mentioned is an important resource. Yeah. Tell us about that.
So 211 is a really powerful number in our community that's really starting to get some traction. And if you see someone that's in a non-emergency situation, you would call 211. So if you think someone's homeless or holding a sign, you could call 211. Tell them where you've seen someone, a description of the person that you've seen. They capture all that information, and then they send out an email and a phone call to either myself or a rescue mission, and they dispatch an outreach team to go check on that individual to see if they're homeless or not.
You started this on the street years ago. Because of everything you're doing now with both In My Father's Kitchen and Higher Ground, are you still able personally to be on the street?
Oh, yeah.
Most days of the week, some days of the week, or is it all, you're kind of running the shop over here?
No, Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm on the van. We bring out a doctor now as well with us from upstate, Dr. Lehman, who does house calls for the homeless. So he rides with me, and Kat, who works with me every Tuesdays and Thursdays. So street outreach. And then Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, a Higher Ground van. That's Carolyn and Kevin that do that. But I'm out on the street still. I'm the director, but I'm also the case manager on the street.
And as such, what would be your message to everybody watching this program today when it comes to the homeless and the hungry among us?
So one of the things that I've realized over the years is the fact that folks are broken. They're broken individuals who have a story that's tragic. There's a lot of childhood trauma. For women, they were physically or emotionally abused as young girls. They get caught in addiction, they dropped out of school. There's just a lot of baggage with folks. And I think the main thing that I would want people to understand is just to have some compassion and an open heart and a listening ear. I say to people, it's one thing to see someone with these eyes and hear them with these ears, but you need to listen and see with the heart. And when you do that, anything's possible to help someone change their life. Just have understanding.
There was a time, I know, when you were also involved in and looking to help solve the terrible problem of human trafficking, which also, do you run into much of that on our streets?
Yeah, some of the young ladies that we work with are selling themselves as prostitutes out on the street to make money, so they won't hold a sign, but they've crossed this line, and we're still building out a project with, we're working with sex trafficking court with Judge Limpert. We have a home that's been given to us that we're trying to refurbish and get online so we could house a couple of ladies at a time coming through his sex trafficking court.
We mentioned a moment ago the need for more private businesses to step up and offer opportunities for employment for men and women. You also, this thing is funded, now you're about to start a second cycle of Higher Ground, right? The county is still helping to fund much of this?
So the majority of the money is going to be coming from the county. So we're going to add an extra day, so we're ramping up, and we're going to add another staffer as well, and we're going to get another 450 people an opportunity to get on this work van. So yeah, the van is, we're always thinking about expanding the program. Eventually, hopefully have 2 vans down the road, so yeah.
And you could always use some private donations.
So the majority of our funding source is private donations. So 75% of In My Father's Kitchen money comes from private donors, and we do that on purpose because then when it's a private donation, if I get an idea, we could do it the way we need to do it. When you get a grant, sometimes you have handcuffs. You have to do it a certain kind of way.
Yeah. You ever see yourself going back into the private world of food and hospitality? This is your calling.
Yeah, so I found the perfect match of both things, my spiritual vocation, and I'm still using food as my talent, right? So they're both married together, and now I really found, I found my purpose, my ultimate purpose.
Let me ask you this, given that, of those 182 men and women that have come off the street, how many of them do you think were really looking for that spiritual aspect of finding their way.
Oh my gosh, a lot of them. So a lot of them, after talking with them, I'd find out, hey, I was in Sunday school as a kid, or I went to a youth group. They all had this kind of connection to some kind of spirituality, but kind of fell away from it. And with me, it's like I don't look for it, I fall into it. I live my faith. I'm not out there proselytizing like that. I'm just living my Christian faith on my sleeves. I'm living a life of compassion, and I'm shining a light, and it's like a moth being drawn to a flame. That's how it happens.
Well, and that's why people are drawn to you, and probably why it's so darn successful. It takes a lot, but you give a lot. John Tumino, we're going to come back with a final word with our Gayle of the Year. John Tumino, when Newsmakers wraps up right after this. John, we've shared some stories today, but you share stories all the time. We're going to give you your website, first of all, on the lower third of our screen, inmyfatherskitchen.org, but you're also on social media too, right?
Yeah, so Facebook, Instagram, I'm driving that every day. If you want to see updated storytelling and things that are happening at In My Father's Kitchen, that's the best way to connect with us as well.
You know, there's a storytelling aspect to the parade this year, because we got a couple of storytellers going to be on this program next week, John Francis McCarthy and Sean Kurst.
Yes.
The Gayle of the Year is John Tumino. We've also, did I mention the parade? Why not show people when it's going to come on? We know where it's going to come on. It's right here, News Channel 9. John will be marching, I assume, with Leanne and perhaps others.
Yeah, so we're inviting people to come out. I could get 100 people to come out. Email us at inmyfatherskitchen@gmail.com, and if you want to join us in the parade and march with us, you could do that.
March 14th, high noon. It's carried, as always, right here on News Channel 9, exclusively and uninterrupted from noon to 3 on that day. John, once again,
thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you for everything you're doing in this community.
Thanks,
for
Dan.
so many people. We thank you for watching. If you've joined this program in progress, you want to watch the whole thing, well, it's online. You just tell people that Newsmakers is up there. You go to the website, our website, up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you'll find news, drop down to Newsmakers, and turn it on. While you're at it, let me also remind you about 211. If you see someone in need, non-emergency, give them a call. They'll hook you up with John in My Father's Kitchen. Hey, have a great week, and we'll see you all at the parade.